it's really my justification. Why is an English teacher talking to you tonight about American jurisprudence with a lawyer, a former student lawyer, sitting about 2 feet in front of me? And the only reason I can offer is that I have been, for as long as I can remember, a courtroom drama junkie. In 1954, I was in the 9th grade, and I may have actually seen this play on television, but if not, I certainly know that one of the very few things my family used to watch regularly on television was Perry Mason. So I became Perry Mason once a week. There were my brothers and my mom from the television set. If you don't know the show, 2 things were absolutely certain. One, the person that Perry was representing was not guilty. He was innocent. Did not commit the murder. And that, except very famous. I did. Gosh, you guys are good. I'm gonna have to watch myself. I almost said, except famously, one episode that he lost, which of course was corrected later. It was a mistake made, but he lost one. But anyway, you knew A, the defendant was innocent, and B, in the last minute, Perry was going to pull the guilty person out of the first or second row of the gallery.
They crack like a walnut.
Absolutely. And in our family competition, when we were a very competitive family, each person would put in a dime, and that was a lot of money. Gasoline was 12 cents a gallon in 1954. We'd each put in a dime, and then each of us had to pick the person we thought was the real killer. By the time, halfway through, by the middle commercial, everybody had to pick someone, and then you watched it. So I have been a junkie. It's gone on. I have been known to watch reruns of Law and Order, Lenny Briscoe in particular. But real life courtroom, I used to go when I was in high school and even in college during breaks, if I were in San Rafael. I went up to the courtroom of Judge Harold Haley, this absurd, caustic man. I would say he didn't suffer fools gladly. He didn't suffer fools at all. It was just fun to watch him. Sadly, he was the judge who was kidnapped during the trial by convicts escaping and was held hostage and shot a few years after I knew that. So I remember him very, very fondly as being very, very charismatic and very, very strong. And then my wife and I go to England frequently, several times, gone to the Old Bailey, and used to go to see the barristers in their robes and wigs, and Mulud in his red robe and wigs and all. So lifetime. And of course, I was almost addicted to the O.J. Simpson, the trial during that time, and more of that in just a few minutes. So that's the narrow context. Now the broader context, I would go back not to 1954, but to 1604. Let's go back about 400 years. Justice, we're all supposed to be equal before the eyes of justice. Think of justice, the scales, the blindfold. We're all equal. But you know, Shakespeare knew different 400 years ago. So it's Claudius who has murdered his brother for the crown. And Claudius in a soliloquy says, in the corrupted currents of this world, offense's gilded hand may shove by justice. And oft to seen the wicked prize itself buys out the law. King Lear says, plate sin with gold, and the strong lance of justice hurtless breaks. Armed in rags, a pygmy straw does pierce it. Yeah, we're all equal under the law, but the wealthy are more equal than others. And nothing has changed. And this play, to me, speaks most directly to underscore that point, and it speaks just powerfully to me. So to illustrate that, let's compare 2 trials, one real life and tonight's play, okay? So real life, we have defendant X, age 46. Tonight's play, a young man unnamed, he's 19 years old. Both defendants charged with murder. Both charged with stabbing a person or persons to death. Now here's where the important difference. The defendant X is an African-American celebrity who can afford to spend millions of dollars for a team of 9 lawyers, ultimately working in different capacities. The defendant in our play tonight is a former juvenile delinquent living in poverty in a slum, and we're never going to see the play. Our play is going to begin with the jury deliberations. We'll hear the judge giving the charge to the jury, probably a court-appointed public defender. Does that make a difference? You bet it makes a difference. Let's just talk about a couple of ways. have said, and I have to assume it's true, that most cases, maybe the vast majority of cases, are decided during the jury selection process. I mean, it's that important. And of course, the most important step in that process is what's called a voir dire, to say the truth, where the theoretical purpose of voir dire is to assure potential jurors, prospective jurors, are assessed to make sure that they are capable of rendering what's the phrase, a fair and impartial verdict. The reality, of course, is that both sides want to get a jury and panel that is going to be sympathetic to their point of view. And they do this by using challenges. There is a limited number of what are called peremptory challenges, where a lawyer, or in some cases the judge, can dismiss a prospective juror without even specifying why. It can't be ethnicity or gender. And then there are so-called challenges for cause, a less limited number, depending on jurisdiction. And then, in theory, then we'll get a balanced jury, a more or less impartial jury. But the reality, once again, is quite different. And if we look at the reality with defendant X, whom his lawyers knew this early, were going to base the defense on the charge that the defendant was a victim of racism by the police department primarily. They were able to seat a jury that included 9 African Americans out of a jury pool that was 40% white. And despite the fact that the prosecution research had indicated that women would be more likely to be sympathetic to the defendant than men, they were able to get 10 women on the jury. The road to acquittal was a 10-lane autobahn in the case of that. Let's go to tonight's play. And once again, I don't mean to impugn public defenders. I know there are very good and hard-working public defenders. But folks, the one in this play, and again, we don't see him, was not one of those. Or he slept through the voir dire. That's what happened. Let me read for you the description in the script of some of the jurors on our jury tonight. One is a, quote, small, petty person. One is, quote, meek, easily swayed. One has, quote, a streak of sadism. One is, quote, honest but dull-witted. One is, here's my favorite, long since defeated by life and now waiting merely to die. One is a bitter, angry bigot. One, quote, has no real understanding of people. One is, quote, a bully, of course, and a coward. He's the one who says about 10 minutes into deliberation, quote, this better be fast, I've got tickets to On the Town. The road to acquittal is a narrow path tonight. Jim sent me an article today, just a little addendum, about Sonia Sotomayor, the relatively new Supreme Court Justice, and she was very much influenced by this play. Her first date with her husband in 1957, they went to the movie version of 12 Angry Men, and she was just thinking about going to law, and she said that experience convinced her, yeah, that's where I want to go. She was particularly moved. There's a juror number 11, I think it is a naturalized American citizen who really reveres the American jury system. He thinks it's a wonderful, wonderful thing, and that inspired Sotomayor. But she also said, the article also said this, that Sotomayor said when she was a lower court judge, she would sometimes refer to the play to instruct jurors how not to carry out their duties. She found it useful in that regard. Now, a second major difference that is made by this whole economic thing we're talking about is the whole thing about reasonable doubt. We'll hear the judge delivering his charge to the jury, and we'll hear him say, if there is a reasonable doubt in your mind as to the guilt of the accused, then you must find him not guilty. Reasonable doubt. Folks, the lawyers, the 9 lawyers, multi-million-dollar lawyers for defendant X could have cast reasonable doubt on the color of an orange. Okay, so we have things like highly incriminating DNA evidence dismissed as either being planted by racist police, or when that couldn't be argued, it had been contaminated by bungling technicians and forensic scientists. Not to mention the famous glove. Okay, so the defendant allegedly had a glove found at the murder scene, matching glove at the defendant's backyard, but prosecution was goaded into asking him to put it on, and of course the glove that it had 3 people's blood on it, 2 of them profusely had shrunk. The defendant had arthritis. He was wearing a rubber glove. It didn't really. And then, of course, the famous, "If it doesn't fit, you must quit." A line I understand taken from a John Barrymore movie. And so, in any case, nothing was beyond those very skilled and expensive lawyers. Apparently, everything was beyond the defense in tonight's play. It takes a juror number 8, to raise the whole question of reasonable doubt, to challenge the very shaky eyewitness testimony by 2 key eyewitnesses, to bring up forensics questions like the nature of the wound, a stab wound, what does that reveal about the person making the stab? Reasonable doubt had to be brought up, just common sense, logical questions that the defense simply did not accomplish. One other contextual point is important here too. The judge will make very clear this is a capital case. There's not going to be a sentencing hearing, any kind of a mercy plea. If the young 19-year-old man is found guilty of murdering his father with a knife, he will go to the electric chair. And this is 1954. Think of Ethel and Julius Rosenberg. There's not going to be stays and appeals and all that. He will be executed. So the stakes are very, very high. The play is not an overt referendum on the death penalty, but I think, given the economics I've just been talking about, I think it must give us pause. I heard on NPR just yesterday, 65% of Californians favor the death penalty. And it's something that may, I'm ambivalent. There are times I see people texting while driving. It seems like maybe a pretty good idea. but I think the play ought to make us think a little bit about that. In the first line in the script, when the guard is opening the jury room, he says, quote, "He doesn't have a chance." He doesn't have a chance. So given that vulnerability, anyway, it's something to think about. Now, the last thing I want to talk about, is just briefly, there's a flip side to all of this, and maybe the antithesis of what I've just been talking about. So this question, is this jury, because it hasn't been called in the way of defendant X's, let's say, is this maybe more typical in some, maybe scary ways of the American jurisprudence? Is this every jury, in some sense, that we're going to see tonight? The jurors in the play don't even have names. They're 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So here we are, just the nitty-gritty of group dynamics. I'm sharing with Jim one of the most bizarre courses I ever took in college. I was an English major and a speech and drama minor, and we had to take a required course was discussion. And we went into this. It was in the Memod, the big building. We were somewhere down in the bowels, and there was this big round table, about 20 of us, and it was undergraduates and graduate students. There were some older people in their 40s, I think, real old. And we went in, and as I recall, I think the class went 3 times a week. The whole first week we went in, and nothing happened. We just sat there, and we'd sit there, and you'd talk to the person next to you for a while, and then somebody would go, "Hey, maybe should we think about what we want to do here or something?" And there was a kind of a pompous businessman, I remember. He was in a suit and all this, and he made the first sort of power grab. He wanted to kind of get things going here. And he was kind of shot down. Nobody liked him. And it was just funny to watch this. So funny, the second week, this little sort of quiet little woman who was sitting at the little table said, "Well, since I am the instructor, I guess I ought to probably..." And then we talked about what happened. And it was fascinating to talk about group dynamics and how did little groups form here and little groups there, and who tried to win over somebody else and all that. So we're going to see 12 people locked in a room. Literally locked in a room and told, you must come up with a unanimous verdict, or you're a hung jury. You failed what you're asked to do. A lot of pressure. And so, boy, watch tonight for egos clashing and people with very different life stories and backgrounds, bringing all kinds of different inclinations and biases. And it's great stuff. It's great drama. So this should be a really intense hour and 35 minutes.